Hey guys, Jeremy Lindsey here. Welcome to another episode of A Quarter in the Couch, where we comb through life's couch to find the hidden value in everyday conversations. I'm so happy to welcome Ryan Cook, who's been a coach of mine for several years and has really, really awesome stories. And I just thought that it would be amazing for my listeners to hear what he had to say and listen to some of the stories of how we talk. So Ryan, welcome to the show.
Yeah, no, thanks for the invitation. Excited to be on here. And a little while ago, I was talking to my wife and mentioned that you invited me to be on the podcast, and she's been like a co-pilot in our journey, together over the years. And she commented on the name of it. She's like, that is such a great name for a show. Yeah.
It's interesting. I struggle with the name a little bit, and we keep coming back to it. And there's something grabby, there's something sticky about it. What does she like about it? I'm curious.
Like, we talked about our relationship, and she's like, but A Quarter in the Couch, that's not necessarily like just what Jeremy does. I'm like, it's all about just finding money. Like, I'm like, remember when you're like a little kid and you hear the ice cream truck going down the road and it's like playing that song, and it's like, okay, I need to come up with 65 cents real quick. The first place you went was the couch. That was the first place you went as a kid to find that extra money, that hidden gem. So yeah, I love it. And that's what she was saying. That's how our conversation went about it.
That's great. That's awesome. Well, I tell her I appreciate her opinion.
Oh, well.
So today we're going to be talking, since you're a sales guy, we're going to be talking a lot about sales. And I thought that we would kick it off with some bad sales experiences. I feel like everybody's gone through a bad sales experience. What would be the story that you want to share?
I have a story of a horrible sales experience that I went through. And it was like it was like almost like a life-changing experience also. Like, I learned so much from it, good and bad, I think maybe I could say. But this is like 20 something years ago. This is a long time ago in a land far, far away. My girlfriend had just broken up with me, actually I just broke up with her, right?
That's right. Yeah. No. They don't break up with us.
No, but I remember just being, this kind of shows that she broke up with me. I just remember being devastated. I was like so sad, and like, we'd been together for a couple years or so probably at that point. And I just remember being like just heartbroken, as heartbroken could be. And a week or so goes by and I get a phone call, and she says, and it's her. And so I'm just like, oh man, I'm so excited, and she says, hey, I miss you. Do you want to hang out? And I'm like, I absolutely want to hang out. And I was actually heading out the door to go shopping. I needed some new ties and I needed some new shirts for work and stuff like that. And I said, hey, I'm going to the mall. Come with me. We'll go shopping. We'll go to dinner. We'll just make like a whole day of it, and we'll just pretend like, and in my mind, I'm like, we'll pretend like, last week never happened. And we go to Nordstrom. And I remember being in Nordstrom, going through some ties and going through some shirts, and I'm pulling a few things out. And I'm in my low 20s at this point in time, 21, 22. But I always wanted to, look very professional. And so I was always trying to get nice clothes for work and everything. And I'm looking at this one tie, and I still have the tie. Like, I could go get the tie and I could show you, this is the tie. I'm looking at this tie. I can't find it anywhere. It's on a mannequin. And you got to remember who's with me too, right?
Your ex-girlfriend is with you. Yes, that's a hard fact to forget.
My broken heart is standing right next to me. And I'm looking at this mannequin and I want this tie. I'm like, oh, it's such a cool tie. And she's like, oh yeah, it's really, whatever our conversation was.
It looks so great on you, Ryan.
Yeah, it would look perfect on you. I even had a suit and cufflinks and everything in my brain that this would go perfectly with. I found somebody at Nordstrom. Hey, can you help me? I can't find this tie anywhere. It's just on the mannequin. Can you show me where this tie is? And she said to me, oh, you know what? You probably should look at other ties. I don't think that one's in your price range. And there I am, emotional, but also like, what the heck? You don't know what my price range is. Like, I was actually making good money then. Like especially for like a 21-year-old, I was definitely in the upper like 10%, I would say. I was in a six figure category, and I was like 21. I'm like, I can afford this tie. And I was really offended. And I was like double because of who was with me. I was like, no way are you going to make me look bad. How dare you? And I was so upset. And I pulled the tie off the mannequin and all my shirts and everything. And I walked over to the cash register and they said, is somebody helping you? And I said, no, nobody's helping me. In fact, that lady tried to get me not to buy this tie. And so I want to make sure she earns zero commission on this transaction. Like I was going to get her back for what how she'd embarrassed me. And then they rang everything up and the tie was like half of my bill. It was like $200 tie, like, or something. It's probably still the most expensive tie I've ever purchased. But there's one rule, and there's a lot of rules, but there's one rule in sales, which is no assumptions. And a lot of times people will make assumptions in a sales process, and all of a sudden they'll be saying something like that. She probably thought she was helping me and giving me good advice. What she did was really trigger my rebellious child inside of me. And I said, I'm going to take this tie and I'm going to go home. I'm taking my ball and go home. But no assumptions is part of, there's a great book out there, The 4 Agreements, and no assumptions is one of them, right? No assumptions, be impeccable with your word. Now I'm not gonna be able to remember them all now that we're live, but no assumptions is a huge one. In sales, the key to good sales, keeping people happy with working with you and wanting to work with you, is to not assume things. It's to ask questions. That's my horrible sales experience that I had. She just needed to ask one question.
I'll tell you this, the one time, I don't know what it is about Nordstrom, but I was shopping at Nordstrom. I ended up walking out. Right next to Nordstrom was a Rolex store or a second-hand store, a used Rolex market. And walked over there and I walked in and I was dressed very casual, right? And these watches anywhere from $10,000 all the way up to $250,000. I mean, there's watches all over the place. So of course there's armed guards at the door, as is with most any luxury brands. And I walk in and they said, hey, can we help you? And I'm like, no, I'm just looking around. And it truly was just looking around. Like I had no intention of buying a watch. And so I'm walking around and I'm asking him about price and this and that. And the guy was like, hey, can I show you one? And I was like, yeah, sure. Go ahead and show it to me. As we're walking around to the cabinet, I see him look at the security guard and nod his head and kind of like do this whole little like this. And the security guard moved to the entrance of the door. And I'm getting ready to try this watch on, and I look over, I'm like, did this guy seriously just think that I was going to walk out and run away with this watch? Like, does he not see the other Rolex that's sitting on my wrist already? Right then and there, I was like, you know what? I'm good. And I walked out. It's like, you're absolutely right. Like the assumption of this kid's going to run away or whatever it is, it's embarrassing. It's offensive. It's ridiculous. We talked about the bad. Let's talk about the good now. Do you have a good sales experience story?
I do actually. And it's one, in sales trainings and when I've been coaching companies, it's one I've brought to the table, I think, as many times as the tie story. And it also starts with a bad experience though. And it ends with a very simple, very good experience. And this is a few years ago now. And we decided it was time to upgrade my wife's car. And she had some very specific things that she wanted. She wanted a sports car. She wanted it to be white. And she wanted the stereo to be really, really good. Besides that, she doesn't really care. She just wants a nice stereo. She wants it to be white and she wants it to be fast. And the kids even started calling, after we got the specific car, they called it the race car. But first we went down to the Jaguar dealership in Mission Viejo, like off the 5 down in Orange County. And we looked at a few Jaguars online. We're like, oh, let's go check one of those out. They fit kind of everything that she wanted. The sales guy was horrible. He was horrible. It was her car. And all he wanted to do was sit there and ask me questions. And he used some classic kind of high pressure tactics. I've got 6 other people that are going to drive this today. And we were like, then sell it to one of them. Like, it was horrible. And we ended up not even being in love with the car anyway. And so it was like, okay, we're out. So we had some subpar sales experiences while we're trying to find her a new car. I'm giving like shameless plugs to car dealerships in Orange County right now. We ended up at the Auto Mall in Cerritos, and And we're at the Lexus dealership there, and I forget the exact car. She doesn't have that car anymore, and I forget the exact car we were looking at. But the thing that happened is we walked up, and right when we walked up in this dealership, a guy came walking out on the car lot like normal, and he said, "Hey guys, are you guys just looking? Are you actively buying? What you guys up to today?" And we said, "No, we're shopping. We're looking for something to buy right now." And he said, "Well, who's the car going to be for? Is it going to be for you, or is it going to be for you?" He pointed to both of us. I said, "No, this is her car. This car is going to be for her." And about 4 seconds later, I realized I didn't even exist in the conversation. And I was like, "Oh, this guy is doing a good job." And I was really appreciative of it. "Oh, way to go. Way to not ask me what is important in the car." And he walked through all the questions and asked her questions, made comments, gave input, guided her through this perfect buying process. And then in the end, instead of saying, "Let's go look at 10 things over here that you actually don't want," in the end, he said, "You know what? Of the thousands of cars that we have here and our other lot, I only have two that fit that criteria. One of them's here. Do you want to take a look at it?" And in the end, what happened was he did what I call the perfect presentation. He said, "Here's a car. It's white. It's a sports car. It's got the best stereo we have. It's got the best trim package we have." He asked her, "What do you want?" And she said this. And he said, "Here it all is." He didn't take us on on a choose your own adventure of, "Let's have you test drive 15 different things to see what you want." He said, "What do you want?" We said, "We want this." He said, "Here it is." And then he said, "I actually have another one. It's red leather interior instead of the gray leather interior. A lot of people don't really like the red." He goes, "I think it's pretty awesome. It's not here. It's up in Brea. If you guys want to drive up into Brea, you don't have to worry. I'm not going to sell this one." And he did the exact opposite. "I'm not going to sell this one out from underneath you. I just want you to see it so you can know that you're buying the car that you want the most." I said, "Okay, well, we'll go up and have lunch up there." We drove up. We ended up buying that one, but he asked the questions. He learned what he needed to learn. And then he gave us exactly what we asked for. So many times people skip the asking questions part and we think we know, and they move to the assumptions. And then all of a sudden now they're trying to do the multiple choice game. "Well, what about this? Well, what about this?" It's like, you should ask me that 10 minutes ago. He did a great job of asking exactly what we wanted and then just giving it to us. Confused buyers don't buy. The more choices you get, like if you want somebody to say, "I have to think about it," give them a lot to think about. Like, it's not rocket science, right? Give them 10 options and they're like, "Well, I don't know which one of these I want. I need to think about it," right? Your job as a salesperson is to narrow that selection process down. And that's why I call it the perfect presentation, because then you give them exactly what they asked for, on budget, on time, right product. And that guy nailed it with us. We ended up, bought a car from him.
You know what else I like what he did it too is he not only listened, but he showed you what you guys were looking for, right? But then he showed you an alternative. And I think so many people miss the fact that when you go in to do something like that, or you think you know what you want until you see something and you're like, "Oh, actually, no, I want that more." Right? And you're like, "Well, I think I want brown leather interior, but instead I think I actually want red."
And he didn't do it in a cheesy way. He did it in a very, classy way. We didn't get "Oh, you've got 10 seconds to make a decision. The clock's ticking. There was none of that. It was actually the exact opposite. He said, "You don't even have to worry about this one. I just want you to make sure you make the right decision. Just go check it out. If you don't like that one, this one's going to be waiting for you. If you do like that one, great. I just want you to be in the one that makes you the most happy."
In this example, how did he build trust with you guys so fast? Because it's apparent to me that he built a trust level with you and your wife very fast, very quickly.
One of the keys to that was not talking to me, because that's what we got at a lot of other dealerships, where she was kind of part of the conversation. She was his focal point. I didn't even exist anymore. And so it was all about connecting with her and understanding what she wanted. It wasn't about asking what was important to me. And so that was a huge part about it, was making the connection with the right person. Right. And not having it kind of like my tie incident. How many times has that has that partner who's been there, who's actually the one that the products for, the services for, in this case, the car was for, where they were kind of a side note in the conversation, and that happened in a lot of other places, but it didn't happen that day. It was all about what she wanted. And I think that builds the trust as well, as the connection with the right person. And then it's just the conversation with that person.
In the conversation with that person, what elements need to exist? I mean, obviously there's that question that you have to ask and you have to be objective about it, but what other things kind of build trust? And I'm guessing some subliminal messaging probably. Like you said earlier, I think maybe a little bit of let your word be gold, right? What other ways can somebody build trust fast?
There are techniques that you can use to help you build trust. And back when I used to do all the big stage presenting and stuff, two that we used over and over and over, because we would have 90 minutes to build trust with anywhere from 300 people to 3,000 people, depending on how many were in the audience. One of them is a pretty common one if people have studied sales techniques, and it's called trial closes, is usually what it's labeled as. And that's just simply asking questions. Does that make sense? Is that fair? Would you agree with that? Is that what you're after? Am I right about that? And you're getting the audience to say, yeah, yep, you are. Yep, that makes sense. Yep, that's fair. It's just those little yeses and those little affirmations that they're now giving back, and they're now a part of the conversation. You're not just talking at somebody. When you just talk at somebody, that's when they fall asleep. They roll up their eyes. They don't want to have anything to do with it. They don't even hear anything you say. But if every minute or two at the end of every kind of point that you're making, if you pause and say, does that sound fair? Does that sound right? Would you agree with that? Now it's a light conversation, but at least they're agreeing with it. And from a NLP standpoint, a neuro-linguistic programming standpoint, you're getting them comfortable saying yes to you, and you're getting them used to saying yes to you. And so that's one element that does help build trust. And then it has kind of that NLP benefit on it as well.
Let me interrupt you for a second, because I think you're touching on a really, really powerful point. I didn't realize it previous to this conversation, but when you pause in the middle of that conversation and you say, does this make sense? You're getting their feedback, and you're getting them to say, you know what, I agree with you, and or no, I disagree with you, we're headed in the wrong direction. Which I think, like you said, the NLGPs, whatever, I forget what you meant, but the point is that you're getting people's buy-in at that point, and you're getting them to agree, not necessarily with you, but with the concept that you're explaining.
And to your point that you made too just a minute ago, it does give them the opportunity to say, no, this doesn't make sense to me, which gives you now the opportunity to either re-explain or say, well, what part of it didn't? Because you don't want to have somebody left behind in a conversation. You can be all the way on third base and your prospect's still on first base. That's not doing anybody any favors. And so it does give them the opportunity to say no as well. And so one of the worst things you could do is do a sales presentation for like 20 minutes, or think you're having a sales conversation 20, 30 minutes, and say, all right, so you ready to purchase, or whatever your closing question is. And they're like, no, I actually have a lot of questions and have no clue about half of what you were talking about. Right. So they do give them the opportunity to raise their hand and say that they're being left behind.
I was cruising social media today, and I came up on one of my buddies' presentation, or one of my buddies' stories, and he was at the Louis Vuitton store, and he brought his kids into the Louis Vuitton store. So it was him, his wife, and his kids, and his 2 daughters, and his daughters they didn't buy anything, but they were walking around with these little tiny Louis Vuitton shopping bags. And the associate actually put lollipops in for the little kids. And the kids are like 8 and 10 years old, right? So they're not super old, they're not super young, but they don't want to be in a Louis Vuitton store because nobody wants to watch their parents shop. But what he ended up saying was, he said the sales associate was so good and attentive and nurturing, and the sales process was so great that he actually ended up spending more money at the Louis Vuitton store so that she would get a higher commission. And so how many times have you had a sales process that was so good that even though you weren't necessarily shopping, you ended up buying from them anyways?
I am a buyer. Like, if you just run a good sales process, I full am born and raised. I'm a buyer. My dad's a buyer. His dad was a buyer. We love to buy things. And I'm trying to think of an exact, example So this actually came up. We were on our big family vacation. The whole family got back to gets, we all get together a lot, but specifically there's a lake that my grandfather's ranch is like on, and where my dad grew up. And it's right on the Utah-Idaho border. It's called Bear Lake. And in California, we have Big Bear Lake, and you could fit about 10,000 Big Bear Lakes into Bear Lake. Bear Lake's way bigger, but it's huge. It's a huge lake. But we go up there, do all the lake things. My sister just sold like half of her podiatry practice a little while ago, like a month or two before we all met up there. And so she had a big old wad of cash, burning a hole in her pocket. And all of a sudden, my brother's really into dirt biking. I've always been, into dirt bikes, and my brother just kind of recently got into it. And so my sister decides, hey, you know what? I want dirt bikes at my cabin as well. So she just orders like 10 dirt bikes from the bike shop, that's like 60 miles away. And they show up, and they're all on a trailer. We ended up buying the trailer from them too. And like, oh wait, we don't have a trailer. Will you just leave the trailer? Yeah, it's an extra couple of grand. It's like no big deal. She spent more time signing all the paperwork, because it was like 10 bikes or something. It was a bike of every size and equipment for every shape and size. She just filled up the whole garage so that if anybody showed up, they'd have equipment and a bike to ride. And so we were joking around about it with the people delivering them. We're like, has anybody ever done this? Is this a pretty normal thing? Someone just calls on the phone and says, hey, will you bring, 8, 9, 10 bikes over to my cabin? They're like, this has never happened to us before. But for me, it happened a while ago. This would have been, I don't know, maybe 10 years ago or so, when I was out shopping for a new bike. And so this kind of got brought up in our conversation at the lake. And so I went in and I started talking with the guy at the Honda shop, and he was like, oh yeah, we've got these new bikes. And one of the things that made me feel really good about buying from him, and I wasn't planning on buying that day. I was just going to go in. I was just going to look at a couple bikes. I was just driving by. I had another bike, but in your mind, it's like, oh, let's go see what's new. I remember being in there, and he was saying, I remember the thing that got me is he said, oh yeah, well, what are you riding right now? I said, I have what was it back then? A 424, a YZF? I think it was a 424. But that's a Yamaha, and I'm at the Honda shop. And he says, oh yeah, well, how do you like it? So it's kind of changed the dirt biking world. This bike's pretty crazy. I love this bike. My favorite bike, though, to go off topic, my favorite bike I ever had was my CR500 that I used to ride at the dunes all the time. But anyway, so this guy says, well, what do you do about the kickback? And I'm like, well, the kickback, I'm pretty good at kicking this bike over. It's a high compression bike. And so when it would kick back on you, it would like break your leg. It was brutal. And I got really good at it, though. You'd find the soft spot in it before you'd kick it. And because when you were learning how to kick that bike over, it was horrible. And he said to me, oh yeah, we hear that all the time. One of the things we've added to these is is an ultra lightweight electric start. He said, so even if you're like you're in the middle of a rocky cobblestone creek and you stall, you just push this button and your bike starts back up. You don't have to drop your feet in the river and kick it back over. And I was like, really? I'm like, show me, and he showed it to me. And I wrote him a check, I don't know, maybe like 20 minutes later, and then put my other bike up for sale. But as we were talking about that this weekend, my dad had bought a bike from him too. And like a week later, I walked back in with my dad. My dad had bought a bunch of bikes like the week before. And he goes, we were laughing the other day about how fast of a decision you made. Once you realized you wanted it, you just bought it. And we were like, man, that was kind of that kid moved really fast. They're all, now that you're in here with your dad, it makes a whole lot of sense. Your dad did the exact same thing. But the one thing that the guy did in his sales process that was great is we were just chit-chatting about bikes. What other bikes do you like? What other bikes do you ride? Where do you ride them? He learned a lot about where I ride, how I ride the bike. He knew, because all those bikes had that rough kickback if you didn't kick it right, that it just pops back on your leg and it is brutal. And he knew about that. And he asked me, how is it kicking it over? How's that? Do you ever have any issues with it? He was looking for pain, right? He was looking for pain, and he found it. Oh yeah, I'm pretty good at it, but it can get kind of gnarly. Do you ever stall out and just need to start it back up? Yeah. like not in a river though. Well, I mean, it hasn't really happened to me that many times where I've been in a tough spot. He says, oh, it's one of the reasons we added the super lightweight electric start to these ones. And he just touched the button and then boom, and the whole thing fired up. I was like, so he found my pain, he exploited my pain, and then he solved my pain.
It's funny you say that because one of the keys to my success is my experience, right? And I worked with business owners for the last 20 years, helping them save millions of dollars in tax, doing the right structuring, just doing some basic stuff. And I came to the epiphany one day that, wait a minute, I have enough experience to know what these people go through before they even call me, right? And so when somebody reaches out and we have that initial conversation, I'm able to lean on that experience to say, hey, I've already worked with a guy like you. I've already worked in your industry before. I've already experienced the issues that you're going through. I've fixed them. And the other issues that you will eventually go through, I tackled those and fixed those too. So it reminds me of your story of how the guy's like talking about this kickstart as if he wrote it himself and as if he had the experience of having guys break their legs himself. And I think that's another key to success in a good sales experience.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And you know how you were describing what you do. I mean, that's why you're a subject matter expert, right? You are an expert in all of those verticals. And for salespeople, you know, in your situation, in my situation, at a company, like a company that I'm consulting with right now, they do branding material. And they're a brand new client of mine, just started with them. And I always focus on what problems do you solve? Tell me about the problems you solve. And they've got some sharp guys and girls there. And one of the guys on a group call the other day said, it's real easy. There's only 9 of them. And he said, we know all the problems before we even enter into a conversation. And I was like, and I said, "Yes, exactly, exactly. And that is something that is advantage salesperson, right? Because you do only operate in like specific niches, right? You know, companies have the things that they do or niches that we operate in. And so we're not solving a new world problem every day. You know, that's trying to be everything to everybody, and then you're nobody to anybody. So that specialized focus like that you have and that you were describing, like that's such a powerful thing and gives you so much information.
One of the other things on top of that is as I'm talking through my sales process, the people that I'm speaking with are also gauging that with how is Jeremy going to do business in the future? So if I say something in the middle of the conversation that is off track, then even if they do move forward with me out of desperation or something like that, then they're always going to have that experience flavor in their mouth, so to speak, where because you start setting expectations about how you work the minute that you start talking to somebody about to a potential new client or customer, they're going to gauge that whole experience. And you're representing your brand. So anytime that they're interacting with your brand, they're going to expect that same level of standard. In-N-Out's famous locally. And so when you go to In-N-Out, you expect the same burger every time, right? I think that's why McDonald's is so popular in the world, because anywhere in the world, wherever you go, you can get a cheeseburger that tastes like the cheeseburger from the original location in San Bernardino. Anytime you're riding a Honda bike or a Yamaha bike, you can expect the same experience. And I think that it starts with the sales process of how to introduce your brand, like BMW. Even BMW would put sales commercials out all day long. Feel the drive is their deal, right? And then anytime that you go and talk to a salesperson, oh yeah, you can totally you could feel the road through the tires and the steering. It's tight and did it. And then you get in the car and like suddenly you could feel the road through the tires, even though you can't feel the road. It sets the standard for the sales process, has been my experience.
Yeah, and we used to have a nice family internal battle actually between Cadillac and BMW. And I remember my grandpa said to my grandma, you know, 50, 60, 70, 80 years ago, they're both passed away now. You know, he was going down this investment path and starting some businesses. And he said, hey, support me in this and I'll buy you a new Cadillac every year for the rest of your life. And grandma got a new Cadillac almost every single year. She got to the point where she didn't need a new one every year, but she rolled through so many Cadillacs. But my uncle was really into BMWs, and so was my mom. My dad's always been a truck guy, and they used to always say though, whenever there was like the banter, you ride in a Cadillac, but you drive a BMW.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and where did they get that from? Right?
Yeah, I think it was an old slogan, wasn't it? Like,
It was a slogan, and I'm confident that the salespeople at BMW were trained on
oh, I'm
always,
sure. Yeah,
always like press it, because you don't
yeah,
buy a BMW
just to ride in it.
just to ride in it, right? You buy a BMW because you want to drive. You
Yep.
want to drive the BMW.
Yeah. Yeah, I had my M3, and you didn't ride in the M3, you drove the M3.
Yeah. Oh yeah. No, my M5, same way.
Yeah.
Same way. Of course, when I bought my M5, it was 2 years after they had the M3 V8 turbo. And
Okay.
so I miss that car so much. I got a Tesla instead. I miss the BMW for sure. One of the keys to Tesla's success is they make buying so easy. There's no negotiating. Like when you think about car sales and all this stuff, like you think, who's the worst? Like, what's the worst industry to be in sales? Life insurance, door to door, and cars, right? And cars. Evil people in the world is attorneys and car salesmen, right?
Yeah, we were talking about kind of the headlines. We were talking about with BMW going in, feel the road, ride in a Cadillac, drive a BMW. And it's those little sayings that you can build really the foundation of a very strong sales process off of. And one of the things that makes sales, or I would say like great organizations great at sales, ties back to what you were saying about McDonald's. Like, you can have the same experience, you can get the same thing, or In and Out, or any of the great franchises. They've systematized everything. One of the things that small businesses, one of the mistakes that they make is and not even just small mid businesses, a lot of times the mistake that you see them make is they rely too much on people rather than on a solid system. And so it's like, you don't need to go have this all-star salesperson if you have an all-star sales system. An all-star sales system lets a C player be a B player and a B player be an A player. There's not a million LeBron Jameses out there that you can just go hire, especially and afford to hire them and retain them as they grow. But so building out these systems that are repeatable makes consistency like your superpower. But it all starts back to getting a philosophy that everybody's bought into and messaging that everybody's bought into. And when you talk about like a unique selling proposition, the one with BMW about you can really feel the road. You can feel it with this car, and everybody's saying that, and their ads are around that, and their questions are around that, their conversations around that. That's solid. They've got their philosophy and everything just dialed in. I like to get on with clients and ask them a lot of questions to try to drive to that. Like, I have a client right now that has a lot of rental property around the University of Cincinnati, and it's not student housing, it's just housing. Student housing would be a violation of the Fair Housing Act. It's just housing. It just happens to be near a university. But one of the things that we were talking about is I was like, okay, well, so tell me about what you do. Tell me about your company. It's like, oh, well, we have 8 different properties, we have 90 different units, and everyone goes through a list of features and benefits. I was talking to some roofers the other day. I said, what do you do? And he says, oh, well, I'm a regional manager for a roofing company. I said, tell me really what you do. And he says, well, we do repairs and we do new roofing. I said, tell me what you really do. And I just kept going through and go through and go through. And finally I said, tell me what benefit I get from hiring you. And he says, oh, well, we fix your roof if it's leaking. I said, well, how does that impact my life? And he goes, well, it makes it so you can sleep good even if it's raining outside. I said, that's what you do. That's actually what you do. Nobody cares what your product or service is. They care, does it change their life? And so I said, now when you walk up to somebody and they say, what do you do? Say, I make it so my clients can sleep well at night, even if it's raining. And now you've created that tagline where then somebody says, what do you mean by that? And now you're actually having a conversation with somebody rather than a sales pitch. They've engaged with you. They've asked you, what do you mean by that? And they were curious because they want to sleep good at night, even if it's raining. Same thing with the rental company. We went through that exercise, and in the end, They make it so their residents can focus on living, just living. That's all they have to focus on. If you rent there, the only thing you focus on is living.
I feel like when you get to that, you've installed the process, your C players turn to B, then turn to A. I think at that point, you hear of the margin of success and you hear of the multiplier effect, right? So business of efficiency, 1+1 is not 2, it's like 4 or 5. I think that as you get better in the sales process, you go from a sales process, it's no longer a sales process, it's an experience. And that's where MasterCard was did really well in the early 2000s, where, they would say coffee shop, $8, buying a cup of coffee, buying a movie, another $16 and this and that. And then having a story about How I Met Your Mother, priceless, right? It translates to, by the end of that process or the sales process that people go through, you realize that you had a good experience. Nobody says I sat through a good sales process. Everybody says I had a great experience, or I had a terrible experience. Let me tell you about it, right? And so I think when people need to understand, number one, I think everybody needs to understand that they are in some form of sales, no matter what role they are in. They play a very, very important part of sales, whether you're a technician, whether you're sitting behind the scenes, whether you're the IT, doesn't matter what it is, you are in sales. And number two, I think you need to go from, I'm not selling, I'm providing an experience. And when you provide that experience, it allows that mindset shift for you to then transfer into, hey, you need this 425 because it's got a lot of power and it's got this and it's got that. No, let me give you a good experience, because when you're in the middle of the mud and you're stalled out, all you got to do is press a button and you keep going. That's your experience. Like, I think that mindset shift, at least for me, as we were working together, we built out a sales process, but the sales process at the end of the day has now become a buying experience for the people who work with me. And that experience, I didn't realize that I needed that process. I thought I was a pretty good sales guy myself. But what that process did was it allowed that consistency. It allowed me to build that trust. And now at the end of every cycle, or at the end of every sales process, my clients realize that they have a really great experience and they know that they're making a right decision. And it leaves them with confidence. It leaves them without buyer's remorse, right? Because buyer's remorse is nasty and terrible. Oh my God. Oh, it's like an acid after a big plate of spaghetti. It's like, it's so bad and it sticks with you, right? So we're coming up on time, and I wanted to end with a couple of hot questions for you, right?
Okay, rapid fire.
Rapid fire, that's what I was looking for. Thank you. We call this the lightning round. What is one mistake that made you better?
I guess it was one thing that I had to fix was organization, right? It was organizing a process to do things in and learning that I needed to do them in a sequential order. And especially in the beginning of my sales career, it was, gift of gab type of things is how you would have described it, but not really a whole lot of strategy into how and when to say things.
And some people feel like that strategy could be manipulative. Why would it not be manipulative?
That is a great question. And it goes even back to what you were just saying about the experience. If you're building your sales process for somebody else, then it's not manipulative, right? If you can describe your sales process to somebody as a value add to them that makes their journey better, then it's not manipulative. It's, there's the acronym SaaS, software as a service. And I have it in one of my playbooks, sales as a service, right? Your sales process should be a service that you're providing for your customers.
That's good. What's one book that you reread?
I've reread, wow, so many times. Russell Brunson's Expert Secrets, 20, 30, 40 times, no idea how many times. And I have to throw the disclaimer that I've audibled it, a billion times, not necessarily just sat down and read it, but there is nothing that I've turned through more times than Expert Secrets by Russell Brunson.
What keeps you going back to it?
His entrepreneurial spirit and, kind of being in a similar journey as far as starting businesses and helping businesses, or, depending on what role I'm in. The other part of it is he was a big stage presenter and I was a big stage presenter. And we even have like a few significant friends in common. And so there's kind of that personal tie as well, where he's become definitely a subject matter expert in a field that I'm very involved in. And so I think there's that as well. Kind of, I was talking with somebody else the other day about it, how I'm like, man, look how far he was able to go with this. I'm like, why can't I? Like, I'm a believer, and if he can do it, I can do it. And so I find a lot of inspiration. But the book is, after I think the third time I went through it, I realized like how amazing. And every time I go through it, I'm like, I'll be out for a run. I'll be 6 miles in and stop and grab my phone and pull it out and write down my time that I'm at and everything in the book, and write down the thing that I just heard, that I have heard a million times but never heard before.
What is one thing that people misunderstand about a sales coach?
That it's just like sales training, like a talk track just fixes everything. A lot of sales is a math problem, and they have to all work together. I was in a session the other day with a group, and I feel like with this specific group, and not the whole group, but a few people in there, when you're giving coaching, I think that a misconception is that just because you're coaching on an element, that you think that nobody's doing that already. A lot of times you're trying to give like one little, especially in a training, one little nugget here or there that just helps smooth a pretty good process out. Sometimes you're overhauling it, but a lot of times, like, I would say as a sales trainer, like, or coach, like, we know you're doing 80% of this. We're trying to find the 20% to help elevate your game. That and training, it's not just training.
No, that's good. That's really good. What is one character trait that you feel like you have to continuously work on and improve?
Being more empathetic. I'm not a feelings guy. Giving people space, it's understanding them. I would say that's something that I work on. I try to work on regularly. I blame it on my parents first and foremost. I wasn't hugged enough as a kid or something. When it comes down to those emotional situations, and a lot of them in a sales process, you try to drive to intentionally, and those are not my comfort zone.
One of the big reasons why I created this podcast is because I want my kids to look back on me one day and realize that their dad was indeed smart, um, and have some of dad's wisdom, right? I think one of the benefits of today's digital era is that we can create this content, and for our kids, when my 3-year-old turns 40, he's going to say, hey, these are the videos that dad did when he was 40 years old. Tossing that over to you, let's assume your grandkids are watching this 40 years from today. What's a couple things you want them to see or hear?
Things I would want them to see and hear would be hard work kind of conquers all. It's amazing how much you can out hustle like everybody. A lot of people, I shouldn't just kind of classify, but I would say a lot of people do just kind of mail it in and do like the status quo, and they kind of get the status quo. I have a lesson that I like to go through with everybody on how do you outwork your competitor, and so inside of a sales process, you're always trying to dethrone an incumbent. Like if you're not the incumbent, you're trying to get them out, you're trying to get your product in. And the only way you do that is by outworking them. They have a better relationship. They've known the people, they have a proven process. And as long as they're doing an okay job, it's going to be really hard for them to lose the account. And so the secret is outwork them. And it was something that I always felt like with my dad. I was always like, man, how does this guy work as hard as he works? And then I would see my grandpa and I was like, whoa, he's trying to keep up with my grandpa, and so we've always had this outwork kind of motor. And I would want them to see that, to see, the businesses that I've been involved with, whether it's one that I'm owning or starting or coaching, I want them to see hard work. Hard work is will pay some major dividends. And even when we're doing sales coaching, I tell everybody it's always quantity before quality. Like if you're only doing 10 cold calls a day, you better be the best cold caller in the world. But if you're doing 100 or 200, you're going to get 6, 7, 8 appointments out of that. But if you're doing 10, you're going to get an appointment a week, because you're not working as hard as the other guy. So hard work feeds the math problem.
It's totally true. Absolutely. Well, Ryan, today's been awesome. Today's been great. What is one thing that you learned from today's podcast that you want to share with listeners?
That I learned that this podcast goes way beyond like tax strategies and like what you do and like what your like more career path is, what your business is. And it is really kind of what I was joking, what me and my wife were talking about, like the name of the show. It is just about finding finding more money. And so that's, in tech strategies, that's in business opportunities, that's outworking sales systems versus sales superstars. So I would say the broad stroke of this show.
I would also say that the thing that I learned today, as we know, every time we get together, we learn something new. But the thing that I learned today is that a good sales process breeds A players, which breeds a sales experience. And so switching from a sales process to a sales experience is the golden coin for me, for sure. To my listeners out there, I hope that the quarter was found in the couch today as part of this episode. Take 30 seconds or 60 seconds and figure out what you learn and take an action against that, right? So let's say that since I learned my sales process needs to become a sales experience, how do I shift, and what's one action that I can take today to shift my mindset from sales process to sales experience, right? So take 30 seconds and reflect on that. If you found this episode helpful, subscribe to the channel and share it with one of your buddies or favorite friends. Until next time, thanks for listening. Ryan, thank you for being a guest on the show. I hope to have you on here pretty soon.